got, I suppose, a challenge for the panel, really. So what are the guys in the room supposed to do with all of that? Because it was a slightly apocalyptic message. I felt slightly different. I felt like I'd be punched in the face, to be honest. A very depressing message. But for you guys who go and see the NHS every day, what can they do? Give them something practical. Sort of back at the beginning where we were asking them for the takeaway. What can they do differently to try and get their heads around what sounds to me a complete mess? Over to you.
First of all, David rehearsed beforehand, but I think there was an alignment there from two very different parts of the country. We hadn't been in contact for some time, but there's a consistency. Just to pick up on some of the words, apocalyptic message. Well, actually, yes. What's at stake here? We're trying to paper over cracks or all the other analogies you can do, but what's at stake is the very system of funding within the NHS. I think mid-term of this government there'll be some serious decisions about how much of the NHS can still be funded free at the point of access and not based on anybody's ability to pay. We're having discussions already. There's right-wing think tanks like Reform working with Norman Warner, an ex-socialist minister, on payment systems for general practice. That's 2 years old. So the discussions are ongoing. So apocalyptic, well, yes, it's going to be a fundamental change to the funding of the NHS. And we're out of time. We've been talking at least 20 years of, I'm sick of hearing the demographic changes, the new technology, the increasing demand on the system. And I still hear something with NHS England saying we've got to rise to this challenge. That's 20 years old. It's done and dusted. We've either got to do something incredibly rapid, playing poker with the system as well. Maybe we've got to. Whether it's the last chance saloon, or we won't have another chance to rejuvenate the NHS. But within that, I think we've got to understand what's at stake. I don't think what's at stake is the service itself as providing, because in time to come, we'll start an ambulance picking up people who have got injured or very ill. We'll start a general practice where you get some of your community services. You'll still get your prescription from a pharmacy. You'll still have some community nursing. You'll still have a hospital, and you'll still have hospitals that are specialised and generalist. So they'll still be there in the long-term future. The only thing that's at stake is how we pay for it. And that's maybe the apocalyptic message, but there is work already going on for that, and we've got to be clear about, therefore, within that environment, not how the industry might align to improve certain providers, but within a service that is stretched to a point where it may not be able to deliver all free at the point of access, or it needs new resource, and the resource may be expertise. I think within that environment there's massive opportunity for your industry. If it was all sorted, we were well funded, and you'd still have that barrier where you see in the GP, you say, you're the spawn of Satan, you're just trying to sell your drugs to me. We've still got that, as opposed to, please come in, we're in big trouble here, and there's lots of things we need, as well as your drugs. So I think within that apocalyptic position, you're in a great opportunity.
I'd echo that, because it's not your job to change the health service, is it, or manage it? And you live within the circumstances that other people control. So tactically, firstly, how do you deal with chaos? If it is any students of history in here, the Bolsheviks took control of Russia, and they started off with about this number of people. But they were the only people who had a plan in a time of incredible disarray. If you've got a plan and you understand what's going on, I think it'd be a real advantage to you. I think the power of some of the traditional heads of medicine's optimization and their like is changing, and that could be good for you. And the localization of it, if you understand that could be very useful for you as well. If you don't worry too much about what you can't control, that kind of classic Covey stuff, one of the tactical things you might want to do at the moment is back winners. And personally, I think that's what we're in for quite a savage period over the next 5 years. So CCGs remember CCGs get authorised every year, and you might see some changes at the leadership. You talk about different interested models, very interested. I was in the CCG. It's the only one that so far has formally merged. That's why we got 209 instead of 211. Most of the others now you're going to see informal groupings. There's hundreds of federations. Which one should you back? The Shelford Group, they're unashamedly a group of winners. When you choose to or not, you need to have some kind of tactics, and you need to have a plan about what you do with the Shelford Group. So it's, who are the winners? What's the tactical advantage? It's not your job to change the health service, vote the government in, or worry about the fact that people die younger than they used to. You see the opportunity in it, and I don't mean that in a callous way at all. It's the same for people in the health service. They need to do the same. And unashamedly, that's what I'm going to do with the doctors I work with. We will work with every device, every neologism, every change of lexicon, because the direction and the sense and the people who win will be the same people who won under fund holding or any other previous regime. But you've got to understand the way of the change in nature of things. But I totally agree with James. I think the more chaos and disarray at the moment, the better for you, and the more people will need you. And some of the practical things he said about, you always worry about things like access. Good federations will bite your hand off if you've got the right kind of value-added program, because we need your help. Unlike PBCs, we don't have any funding. Okay, we have to make funding up. One of the successes of PBC, there's a small amount of grants, typically less than £2 a patient, but it was very useful. We don't have that. So things like the sort of thing that James said, project management, marketing, health promotion, helping us with logos, websites. We need to devise staffing models. The NHS has got nothing we'd envy. You're the guys with competency-based assistance. You know how to do all these kind of things. So many things that would be interesting to talk to you about. Okay, so seize the day.
Can I just ask very quickly, David? If I'm on that side of the room, how do I pick a win? What do I look for?
That's, I charge a lot more money a day to answer that question. No, I don't.
We're not paying.
Look at the industries you work in. You should be good at doing that kind of stuff, can't you? You should be. And these winners are perennial. The Shelford Group are self-selecting. What put them in that position? Which foundation trusts are buddied up with other ones? Who's got specialised commissioning status and other ones haven't? Yeah? Which groups of GPs are out there? As mentioned, Guy Whitstable, John Ribchester, James mentioned, whatever government and whatever system the NHS has had, he's had a lead and exponent and travelled along a very clear direction of travel that's taken 20 years. Where are people like that? Okay? And I know there are clear places that are failing. The kind of places that I go to, and a couple of weeks ago I was in a hospital, I won't mention where it was, and they don't have individual patient reporting, they don't have service line reporting. These are all accountancy things I don't really understand, but every good foundation trust has it. Good foundation trust now can do individual patient costing. So there's all kinds of barometers, soft and hard, that you can kind of trace. But without being too trite, one of them would be, have they got a history of dealing with you guys and working with you constructively? If they haven't, how many times do you ask somebody out before you take it and they're not going to go out with you? But there's soft criteria and there's hard ones on your Boston matrices.
Sorry. Thank you, David. It's very helpful. I think I particularly agree with the self-selection element of the Shelford Group. And I think there's two things I would suggest. One is you align, or you first of all map the whole care pathway that you think you're going to have anything to do with, and then marry it up against what you think the NHS is going to be, not now, but in about 12 months' time. Because then you can start filtering against the Shelford Group and so on to figure out where you're likely to have an impact on the care pathway, negatively and positively, so that you can then position your offer as something that's positive. And certainly, the one thing I disagree with some of what was said earlier on was that chaos is good. Because in one sense, I think chaos is, forgive the language, a bloody nightmare. Because everyone's too busy. So what we've always had, and we heard from, I think, both James and David, that guys now, and ladies, going to see NHS providers and commissioners tend to not necessarily know everything that they should know when they're going to that meeting. So I said earlier on, and Dave and James echoed, that we need to get better at understanding what the position is from the point of view of the person we're talking to. So first seek to understand and do before you go in. then make sure that you've aligned what you can do and offer around the whole care pathway. It's not just one bit of it. But if you take specialised disease, which we'll come on to, a lot of that is held up at NHS England level for very good reason. But if you've got a patient with a very rare condition, some elements of their care is not very rare and it's not particularly complicated. Who's going to pay for those bits? And that's what I think NHS England forgot about. It's not as simple as just saying, oh, take all these diseases out of the system. It's not that easy. You need to map all the comorbidities and all of the things relevant to a disease or your product, and then figure out who you sell it to. And if you go to the self-selected few, you're probably onto a bit of a winner in terms of getting some airtime if you can show you add value. And it's got to be real value based on evidence, not based on a hypothetical model based on some evidence that once existed but nobody believes.
I'll ask a question of the room, really. Obviously take questions, but without giving the game away, has anybody seen, in your organisations, has anybody seen a mid-term or long-term plan which anticipates the kind of structural and organisational sort of chaos that we're talking about? Sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. These things are, as James said, they're not going to happen in the future, they're happening now. So, what do you think you could do in your organisations to make people aware of what's happening? Where do you think the message should be coming from? That things are drastically changing in the NHS, and those certainties that you've been used to, even changes we had in 2013, not that different to what we had before. If we're anticipating a real disturbance, where do you think the information should be coming from in your organisations?
Sure, can I ask you a quick supplementary to that? Quick show of hands from what we were talking about earlier on. Who's actually looked on Google which hospitals belong to the shelter group? So who's actually looked? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. About 7? Does that mean the rest of you haven't, or you just shy and waiting to admit it? But I think that's honestly quite telling, that if we hadn't sought to understand what the structure of the NHS is in the areas that are likely to do the best in the next 5 years, what chance have we got? And I think to some degree we need to take an honest look in the mirror, at ourselves and say, are we fit for purpose? Have we mapped out how we affect things in the system? And have we really mapped out where we think the system will be, or are we just playing at it? And that's quite a slightly provocative thing to say, but I've looked myself in the mirror and asked that question, and I've not entirely been happy with the answer at the time. So.
See, if I were you guys, I'd probably be thinking, right, somebody in the organisation should be producing something written down rather than a one-to-one conversation, which explains how you can help. Picking winners is great, but consoling losers is great as well. If an organisation is failing, there's an opportunity there for you to go in and offer a service or advice, but you can't do that ad hoc, one-to-one. You need to have something to bring with you, something that they can take away and consider. And I don't think that's happening in pharma at the moment. I think the NHS, as James says, still has a rather negative view of pharma. But I think pharma still has what I call a traditional view of the NHS. We talk a lot about shared services and sharing resources and expertise, but I don't see it happening a lot. I mean, has anyone got any examples? You guys do market access. When you're going in to see the NHS, has anyone got any examples of where you've been able to say, look, this is what we can do for you, this is how we can help you manage efficiencies or whatever? Has that actually ever happened? Spin the camera around, Kelly. No, so I think maybe for the next 20 minutes or so we should think about some things, get some ideas together as to what you can practically do. Because it's all very well and good hearing the message, and it's all very well and good understanding how things are changing, but you need to know what to do. I don't think it's rocket science. I don't think you need to go off and get a PhD in anything. I just think there are probably 5 or 6 things that we can probably come up with today, advice from here, which will give you something to do. And just to go back to your organisations and say, look, we need information on this. We need a different approach here. And it needs to be concrete, not just abstract, not down to me when I go and see somebody. It needs to be something material. So give them 3 or 4 things that they could do in their organisations, material change that they can make.
Just one very quick one from me. Again, it's treating you like children. I won't put your hands up. The new body in East Anglia. I think it's called, I'm hoisting my own petard now, Uniting Health. Anybody familiar with that? Or Unity Health? Yeah? Which one of it is, what's it called? Is it Uniting Health?
Uniting Care Partnership.
Yeah. United Care, right. Somebody came to see me the other day. This thing, put it in Google again, you see about it. It's a combination of 3 NHS organisations that come together and they want a massive contract to deliver community care across Cambridge and East Anglia way. Yeah? And someone came to see me, farmer, and I said, the place you guys ought to be is down there. They're a really impressive organisation. Everything they're doing is just the kind of portfolio that you've got. And the person actually rang me a couple of days later and said, well, thanks for that, but we don't go and see them because they're not a vanguard. That's why I came to see you. So one of this is, it took me back to the 1990s. Okay? When I worked in a big pharma company, somebody would invest a fortune in something on laptops. We'd be in the Celtic Manor for 4 days, and we'd come out and we'd say, Newcastle's a red 34BZ green. So Tommy's going to go in there, and Tommy's saying, oh, I don't know anybody there, and they use that competitor. But Cambridge, that's the place to go. Oh, we don't go to Cambridge, they're not a vanguard. So I think it's, you know, I can see people laughing and smiling, and I know a lot of this comes from Denmark, it comes from America, it comes from Germany, but that's the thing I would do differently. Why have a guy out in the field who's an expert and you empower, and some of them are really, really good, and then you don't give them a chance to have a local strategy? So, you know, Manchester, I think it's collectively taken you guys by surprise, but what a fantastic opportunity that is for you. But how many people are doing different stuff in Wales and Scotland, and that happened 15 years ago? You know, so that local, that's what I would say to you, that is a real story. I even had, if you want to talk to her, the woman who heads it up, she's a farmer-friendly lady called Debbie Morgan. She's an extremely impressive person when you hear her speak. I said, I'll get hold of Debbie and I'll get you in, get you an appointment. We can't go there, they're not a vanguard. They're not a 347 green B. Yeah?
Just some reflections on the debate we've had just in the last few minutes. Probably in no particular order, but I guess we're talking about new metrics by which you would say what is a successful organisation and how we should align ourselves. You've already got detailed metrics, you've probably got better in terms of drugs, information about who's prescribing what in a local area than any other part of, well, certainly in the health service. So you've already got a way of identifying what you might classify as being successful or not, or where then your representatives might have their target prescribers. It may be looking at metrics that are linked to the financial stability of an organisation, the due deal. You know, do you want to align yourselves with a really poorly performing organisation who's just going to look for a cash cow? It might be there's existing award winners rather than vanguards, because when NHSE or the service identify some leading edge or, you know, anoint people, then they've got everyone over like a rash. And maybe you need to look at others who are doing good things and they've got awards. And what we never do, and lots of organisations give awards and then we forget about them. I've been on about, for many years, have we got a catalogue or a library, some way of collecting over time, whether it is the NAPC or the Alliance or the BMA or the HSJ, the award is a moment in time, but just, so the metrics, I mean, your representatives will have a massive amount of information locally about the good and the bad, the indifferent, the ones who can be influenced, the ones who can't, but how the metrics are aligned to say, these are the people we're going to try and invest in because they're being successful by the metrics we've got, rather than investing in failure, where you're probably being more welcomed because of the cash resource. And I remember just about backing winners. My first interview for the Department of Health in 1998, I had to come up with a new strapline at my interview for the NHS. And our practice was doing investors in people at the time, so I came up with the NHS investors in failure. It was about as quiet as the interview. Anyway, the rest is history, because I got the job, but I went on to explain that we turn off so much of the NHS who are being successful, and at the time it was fund holding, you're successfully managing a budget, you then had your next budget set on your outturn, which was always smaller because you were successful. The ones who overspent got a bigger budget. So there's lots of examples of where we invest in failure. Maybe the backing winners is really important, but the metrics by which you'll say these are our winners rather than the old metrics you're using about maybe just on prescribing. And looking to work with other organisations who have influence. And I'll put a pitch in for the National Association of Primary Care, because that organisation, which I'm president, I'm not very operational in it, but does work with the industry to look at everything from market access. We've got innovation networks which are aligned with the pharma industry to implement programmes, change programmes, which lots of companies are accessing, but there's others who may not be so well thought about. The third sector. I've just set up a programme with CEAC UK. This is partly through my pharmacy. I'm, in my spare time, I chair a pharmacy, independent pharmacy group as well. So we've done a programme with CEAC UK with a company who does point-of-care testing in 20 pharmacies to look at 800 case finding. CEAC UK want to raise awareness. They're thinking there's underdiagnosis in certain conditions, anemia, osteoporosis. So we're doing a case-finding audit that's aligning with successful pharmacies to do market testing of this point-of-care test. Age UK, DUK, diabetes, these organisations that are looking for it. It may well be that you're aligning with those who are ready to try and raise awareness in their particular disease areas. But it may be just thinking differently about the service as a whole, when we're talking about integration. Other thoughts, yeah, well, maybe I hand back because I could become a monologue again, but just interesting. One other thing about when I want to get into when you say about the Bolsheviks and the small group of people change the world. But it's interesting taking that analogy. I used to use it that the survival of our NHS was linked. There was a society that grew up in a particular type of world that was their world and nothing outside it. Now it's in history books. It lasted 70 years. We're up to 67 years in the NHS. That 70-year programme was called communism. Now it's dead and buried. To think that the NHS, in its current form, is going to survive forever is just wrong. And then probably, finally, Christians think about chaos. I still think about the Thatcher outlook that keep the professionals busy and then they won't make trouble. I was hoping that we had a majority government but by about one seat because they could get nothing done, because when politicians have got power, they make all sorts of stupid decisions and then keep us all busy. We want it the other way around, we want to keep them busy, so we have certain, I agree, stability. We want stability in the services, not stability in the politics.
Don't forget the Bolshevik Revolution ended with Stalin, so if you're feeling particularly revolutionary, you might want to calibrate that.
Well, he had a 5-year plan, didn't he?
Yeah, did that work?
All 5-year plans were.
It's got, first we renamed it. I did some work for NHS London a few years ago, an organisation that no longer exists. It's now called NHS England. It's the same building, the same people work there. And we had some delegates from Singapore come over, from Singapore Health Ministry. It reminds me of what David was saying about visitors from America. And they came over to learn about the NHS, because in Singapore they don't have the same healthcare system. They thought you paid for healthcare over there. They wanted to learn something from our model of healthcare. And got on really well with these people. And I realised that has anyone seen the film Paddington? Yeah, you know the story. Paddington arrives from Peru, and he's got this idea of England that's about 1935. And after getting to know these people from Singapore, that's the England they expected. They expected rolled up umbrellas and bowler hats and for people to actually get out of the way when they were walking on the path. And at the end of it all, I took one of these guys out to Starbucks for a coffee and say goodbye, and he said, don't take this the wrong way, but I don't really think we've got anything to learn from you. I don't think the system that you think you've got is the system that you've actually got. And this is what David was saying about fragmented systems. They come over here with this expectation that we have this fantastic integrated sort of 1940s model of healthcare and that we still open doors for each other. And to discover, when we took them around some of the London hospitals and showed them what was actually happening, it's a very different system. And I guess he was right. I think if you remember back to the Olympic Games, the opening ceremony, and all the children were jumping up and down on hospital beds, and the nurses dancing around brick poles. Isn't that weird? Yeah, well, a strange way to sort of self-identify as a nation, this idea, this 70-year-old institution. It has changed. it's no longer the same thing. Some of the things we've been talking about today, I think, reflect that. It's a very different system we're going to have. It's kicking in now. That's why I think you need to have a plan. So go back, not the 5-year plan, not Chairman Mao's plan. You need to have your own plan in your organisations to accommodate chaos, accommodate things changing drastically. Not just the stuff you're used to look ahead to what's going to actually happen.